Okay, so go ahead and start and tell us who you are.
I'm Beatty Brasch, and I've known Helen since early 70s. In fact, I knew her before that. I was on Lincoln Action Program Board of Directors, and she was on the City Council, and that was, gosh, back in the 60s, I think. 60s or 60s probably. And I got to know her then, and I was so amazed that she'd come to the Lincoln Action Program Board of Directors, you know, and worried about poverty and worried about those issues as a city council person. And as it turns out, Helen was basically lived only a couple blocks from us, so we got to know her from walking, from other activities, because she was always very involved with the Democratic Party. She was involved with all sorts of issues. Then she ran for city council back in the 70s and did that for, I think, 4 terms, and then ran for mayor. And I was involved with her on the city council, you know, we'd see each other and different issues. And then when she ran for mayor, I was her campaign chair for both times.
Really?
Yeah. So worked very hard. Helen, as you know, is a very demanding person. And but it was an incredible campaign, both of them.
Tell us some things about the campaign.
The first campaign, she was running against the mayor, incumbent mayor. And, you know, so took a lot of nerve to do it. But she was encouraged actually by a group called Justice Inc. back then, and I belonged to that. But that was, and they said, why don't you run for mayor? And I think that was one of the reasons that she was encouraged to do it. Because we felt she could make such a difference, because she was such a people person. And she wanted to empower everybody to do what they could and be the best that they can. And she wanted everybody involved, no matter what it was. So, and she did agree to do that. And she won the primary, if I remember correctly, and then she won the general. And which was great excitement, obviously. Mm-hmm. And that to beat an incumbent mayor and did it with grace and dignity, and she had a great time campaigning. She's a fantastic campaigner, as you can imagine. Everybody loves Helen. She knows everybody who she doesn't know, and she remembers everybody. That's why I always was discouraged by her. I thought, oh my God, she remembered their kids' names. So she'd run up to somebody with, how's Sam today, you know? And she had a great sense of humor, which also made it a lot of fun. We had, I remember we had a Sam Schwarzkopf yard sign. My son decided that she had to have that. And just as a joke, kind of, but you know, and so he'd run up to Helen and say, I love Sam, I love Sam. He's honorary still today, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And Helen was kind of ornery, too.
Oh, Helen was very ornery.
What do you think was the thing that really inspired her to be so involved?
I think that she cared about people. She wanted to make sure that everybody was involved in government, and she wanted to make sure that that happened. And I think she wasn't a person that, you know, from power from the top down. She wanted to be equal. I mean, if you remember, back then she had planning meetings. Were you part of that by any chance? Mm-hmm. And she'd have a planning meeting for how the city was going to grow back then. And I mean, 200 people would come to these meetings. And I thought, Helen, you're crazy. But all these people would come and they'd listen and they'd give their decisions and talk about what they thought should happen. And Salt Creek was part of the decision at that time. But she cared a lot about the city. She cared a lot about the people. She wanted to make sure everybody had equal access. Even back in the 1970s, I was chair of the Human Rights Commission. And we decided to pass the gay rights ordinance. And the commission agreed and voted on it and sent it up to Helen. And this was in the 70s, and she, you know, approved it and supported it. I'm sorry the city members didn't support it. It was 80% to 20%, but that was because there was a lot of negative, very untruthful stuff that came out, anti-gay stuff. But, you know, she'd always been for the people, and she didn't care who you were. I remember, I think she was the first person that ever went to the Malone Center, first mayor. And so she, You know, once she was mayor, she was still inclusive.
Whoops.
Oh, okay.
Wouldn't you know?
I remember
so
the
sorry.
sentence. It was like
I know, I'm so sorry. Wouldn't you know, because we said nobody would call me.
Oh,
And they
no.
did.
I was saying about it.
Uh,
Come on, you're young.
I was gonna say, I don't remember a thing.
you were just talking about she
The
supported
gay and rights thing, the gay
rights.
rights thing, and how she
She
supported
was
it,
really
but
for the people.
Yeah.
and they didn't support it through the commission, but she was really up for that. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
It's
All right.
it's recording.
Okay,
I
go
have
ahead.
some funny stories about Helen.
Okay,
You
let's
tell
do,
them?
yeah, tell stories about her. Yeah.
Okay, if I can remember them. But Helen really had a great sense of humor, and she loved to. She was really pretty mischievous in her own way. One time, it was Sue Sampson was having a birthday party, and I decided to have it at the dump. You know Sue? She's a great environmentalist. And I thought, I'll have the birthday party at the dump. And so I told Helen she wanted to go, of course. And so she comes out to the car with her grandmother's silver candelabra and lace tablecloths. And we head out to the dump. So I thought, this is great that Helen's with me. I'll be able to get inside the dump, not just outside the gates, because Helen's with me and she was mayor. So I was all excited. So I went up to the gate, and you had to sign in or you had to drive in, and then there was some gate, somebody stopped you. And so I started to say, we want to have a party by the dump, and they were saying you can't do it. And I looked back to see Helen to get her to say something, and she was on the floor lying down.
She didn't want it.
She did not, and she would never use her power for anything. And it always frustrated me to no end, because I always wanted her to use her power for what I thought was important.
So they denied you the birthday party?
No, we had it outside the gates. So it was right outside the gates, right there. So we still had our birthday party. It was still fun, but it would have been more fun inside.
She wouldn't pull her mayor card out, huh?
No, she never would. Another time I wanted her to do it is, it was Brenda Salee. Do you remember her by any chance? She would work for juvenile court, and it was her 60th birthday. And so we were gonna go leave some presents for Brenda in her office. And I had this old plaster cast with broken arms and the iron rods coming out and the whole thing, it was only half there. And so I thought, well, this would be a great present for her. I need to get rid of it. And so I had some old rotten crayfish in the refrigerator. And so I thought, well, that'd make a nice cap for this fine plaster statue. So I got that, and I had that in the car, and a bunch of other flowers to put on the statue, ugly plastic flowers and all that type of stuff. And so we had to go to the city county building. So we got there, we took the stuff upstairs. And I said, okay, Helen, we got to get into her office, because it was locked. All of the offices, they were locked. I said, Helen, would you please go down to the county police or the police and ask them for a key to the offices? Nope. She wouldn't do it. And I did every trick I had in the trade to try to get her to do it. So we ended up leaving it on the outside, so when Brenda walked in, she would see it. And we wrote on it, Happy 60th birthday, Brenda. So the next day I get this call from Brenda Salee, and she said, Beatty, she said, it was Judge Nuremberger's 60th birthday. He thought it was for him. So he got this horrible statue from Brenda with his hairs coming out and everything.
He thought it was from Brenda?
He thought it was ridiculous. It said, Happy 60th birthday, Brenda. So it was outside his office, so he thought it was his.
Oh no, poor Brenda.
Poor Brenda was just mortified.
But Helen would not let you in the offices.
No, it was her fault.
It was her fault.
Well, of course it was her fault. If she had let us in the offices, which she could have easily done, it would never have happened.
Oh, that's great. Did she ever talk about, like she was the first woman mayor of a big city, and she was the first, eventually ran for governor. Did she ever talk about being a woman in that kind of position, like a woman running for political office or anything like that?
She didn't dwell on it.
Did she
I think
get opposition because she was a woman?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, women were not capable, you forget. They were not supposed to run for office. So back then, nobody had run for office. She was the first, if I remember right, she was the first woman on the city council. First woman for U.S. Conference of Mayors. I mean, she was the first woman for many things. And back then, women were to be seen and not heard. And so I think she had supporters, obviously. There were enough men out. She had a strong campaign, but a lot of people didn't care. But there were a lot of people who thought that she should be home cooking and cleaning the house.
What about the governor's race when the two women were running against each other? Did she seem to be burdened by that, or did it make any difference to her?
I think she thought it was exciting to have two women running. I thought thought that was great.
Yeah.
And of course, the tragedy is she didn't win.
Yeah.
Which was really too bad. But
Yeah. But on the other hand, she really paved a lot of way for other women to be involved.
Oh, she absolutely did. She always encouraged women. She did everything she could to support them.
What do you think is the reason why women today are not in as much as they should be? I mean, we don't have enough women congressmen and senators
No,
and
absolutely
state
not.
senators. So what do you think is the reason for that?
Partially money. Men traditionally earn the money. They don't have the money and the resources that a woman doesn't. I think some people are hesitant. I mean, there's still discrimination. So I think they haven't gone up the corporate ladder, all of them. But it's too bad, it's tragic, because many of the women, think of the great women leaders we had: Sue Bailey, Jan Gallagher. We've had a lot of really outstanding women who run for office and did a great job.
But it is difficult to get women to run today. And I think a lot of it has to do with, like you said, the money. And then also the negative publicity. And
Yeah.
Did
Well,
Helen
that's
ever
right.
did Helen ever, how did she deal with the negative publicity?
I think she just took it manufacturally. It really didn't bother her that much. I mean, it wasn't true. So she was a strong, determined woman. And she wouldn't let little things get, beneath, wouldn't bother her. She was very driven in her own way, even though in a very nice way, but she was very driven.
Had she had a professional career?
No, she had, basically no. She just had run for the city council because she was very involved with the League of Women Voters. And they had encouraged her to run for city council. And Mike was always amazing because he was very supportive of whatever she did. In fact, one time a man came up to Mike and said, your wife's what was it? Your wife is pretty smart. No, I have to come back to that. You have to, basically, I got to think of what he said. Your wife is smarter than you are. And Mike said back to him, you're right, and she's smarter than you are too.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Mike made the campaign slogan. He always doing that. And one of his campaign slogans I loved was, don't be useless, vote for Boosalis.
Lynn Roper said that she got a lot of support from Greek people around the country.
She did, yeah.
Yeah, because Boosalis is a Greek
Greek name, yeah.
Yeah.
So she did get a lot of support from that, yeah.
That's interesting, isn't it? I never had heard that story before, that she got checks from people all over the United States that were Greek because she was running. That's really interesting.
I think mainly for governor, but mayor too somewhat.
Yeah, but the governor's probably was more
public.
and people knew about it across the nation. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about women today and what you see as the biggest challenges for women today.
Oh, I think it's still hard for women. I think there's still a lot of discrimination. And partially it's because it's the women that have the children. They're working, and frequently they're the ones that stay home. And so I think people are sometimes hesitant to hire them because of that fear. And to be accepted into the corporate boardroom, I think is, or to any group, men just naturally, I think, command more attention, get more attention.
Let's talk a little bit about women in poverty, because obviously you have a lot of firsthand knowledge about what's happening for women right now. It seems to be a really shift to women and children being in pretty extreme situations in poverty. Let's talk a little bit about women in poverty in this city, because a lot of people don't really see Lincoln as a place where poverty exists. So
1 in 5 children live in poverty, and when you talk about poverty, it's for a family of 3. I'm just rounding off the numbers. It's $18,000 a year. Half of them live on less than $9,000 a year, and a quarter of them live on less than $4,500, $5,000 a year. So if you can imagine surviving on that that'd be 2 kids, and a single mom frequently. So a lot of times it's the spouse has left, the abusive situation, or their spouse has left them alone. But they face very, very difficult times. If you have no resources at all, basically, you can get from the state ADC or TANF as it's called, but you get $368 for a family of 3 a month. Now that's not survival. And we're asking these mothers to be good parents. We expect them to take both roles. We expect them to be mothers of the year. And how can you? If you have no resources, how can you when you don't know where you're going to live tomorrow? How can you when you don't know if you're going to eat tomorrow? The tension and the stress of being in poverty. And it's one thing our society has to deal with. We have to come up with a solution to poverty. And frankly, the solution is very easy. All we have to do is give them enough money so they can survive. And I think you'd be amazed at what they could accomplish if they had enough that they knew their rent was paid and their utilities was paid and they're going to have enough food. And then let them work. Now if they work, they're cut off quickly. So let them work and earn a decent amount before you start taking it away. And I think it'd be amazing what we could accomplish if we just did that. But instead we keep them in extreme poverty so they really can't move out of it. And it makes it very difficult. And once they do get a job, it's also, quickly the subsidies taken away from them, and their food stamps and their ADC. And when you think about 1 out of 5 children, that's a lot of people in this city.
And there's so little that children can do. They can't do anything about their own circumstances.
No, they certainly can't, and they just aren't getting the chances. Yours and my kids get every break in the world, every swimming lesson, every tennis lesson, every whatever lesson. And if they need tutoring, they need help in school. Plus, we're used to going up to school and advocating for our children. These children grow up in a completely different situation.
And that's all they know.
And it's all they know. It's all they can know. Mm-hmm. And it's all the parents can provide. I think they get Mother of the Year. If I had $500 a month I was living on, and I kept the kids together, I would think I was a miracle. It's so much harder, And we stress and say, we don't have a babysitter for this or that, and say, how hard it is with the little kids. It's nothing. They're in a tiny cooped up apartment that probably doesn't have air conditioning, sometimes doesn't have heat, they may not have any utilities are cut off 10% of the time. 10% of the families we interviewed at Christmas, families with children, their utilities were cut off. 11% didn't have utilities on. That's not fun.
And it's impossible to get the time to even get the resources because it takes so much time to go out and go through all of the hoops that you have to go through.
That's right. They spend their whole life going to get food. Different agencies.
Right. Well, your center does town. I don't know where we would be without you.
Well, thank you. We try hard. It's important work.
It is. It really is. Okay, one last question that we ask is, what would you say to young women today? A piece of advice, something that you would like to have them know, or what you think that they could do that make things different?
I think they should model themselves after Helen and how she acted and how she acted towards people. She accepted everybody. She treated everybody with dignity and respect, and whether they were low income or high income. And I think she's a great role model.